Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today calls herself a subversive feminist who masquerades as a little old lady with blue hair. At 22, in the mid-70s, she packed up her 3-year-old daughter and moved from Minneapolis to the Women's Writers Center in New York State. For a year, she studied writing and literary criticism with second-wave feminists. She has degrees in English and communication, had a career in education, and in retirement writes novels and essays. When not writing, she trains and competes hunting dogs. Welcome to Authors Over 50, D.K. Kennedy.
Hello.
Deb, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
I've thought about knowing that question was coming. Of course, I've thought about it, and my answer is it didn't take me long. It took me exactly as long as it needed to take. And once I made the decision to write a book, it actually felt like that was the right time that I was writing what I needed to write when I needed to write it. Of course, I had a career, a busy one, and I raised a child, and that takes up a lot of time. But realistically, I could have written more. I always wrote, but I didn't devote the time and the seriousness to it that I probably could have. But once I retired, I was so at a loss as to what I was going to do with my life. I didn't want to volunteer. That felt too much like work. I didn't want to. My daughter lives in San Diego, which is about as far apart from me as you can be. And there's only so much visiting that grandma can do. I didn't know what to do with myself. And it was kind of scary. And so what I did is I thought about, what did I like doing as a child? What really made me happy as a little girl? And there were a couple of things that made me happy. And one was writing, telling stories and writing. And the other one was playing with dogs. So I got a puppy and I wrote a book.
Well, I think those are the two best things you could do in life.
I think so.
And I certainly agree that if we wrote our stories when we were young, they would be entirely different stories than after the life that we've lived and the experiences that we've had. So I think timing is everything about writing these books.
It's like I said, it's the book that I was meant to write, and I wrote it when I did because it was just the right time. And although it was a struggle at times, it was a joyous feeling to be writing a book and to just put stuff down.
Well, you've lost your blue hair, but
I've had to change that on my bio because it's not blue anymore, but maybe I'll put some blue in because I like it so much.
Well, and I'm interested because we have a pair of Labrador retrievers, so I have to hear about what dogs you train and how long it takes and what all you do.
Right now, I have a litter of puppies. I have 6-week-old puppies downstairs in my house, and they're absolutely adorable. I considered having one just to show because they're so cute. They're hunting dogs, like Labrador retrievers, except that they're pointing dogs. So they're English setters, and I've been competing them and raising them and breeding them for over 30 years. So it's and I thought I was done. I thought, oh, I'm getting too old. I should just get I should get a little lap dog, get a little Maltese or something. And my husband said, no. He said, if you're going to get a dog, get a real dog. So, which I mean, no offense to any of your listeners that may have Malteses or anything else small, but and I'm so glad I did. It gets me outside. I love being out in the woods, and there's a lot of it where I live here in New Hampshire. So that's my story about dogs. I really, really enjoy them.
Well, there's nothing better than watching a dog work and in those fields and pointing. And I just love that. I would like to go out and just sit every day and watch dogs work.
Well, I'm fortunate to have that.
Well, Deb, since you immersed your daughter into a writing center when she was a toddler, did she pick up the craft as well as her mother?
She did. She did. She did. My daughter is a writer and editor in San Diego. She's working pretty much with in a corporate realm, but most of what she does is write and edit. She manages a small team of creative people and oversees their output and does all of the a lot of the serious work for this company. She does it. She's wonderful. I mean, whenever I go to her, and I try not to overdo it because she does it for a living, it's kind of like asking, a doctor friend to diagnose something. So I try to really limit it to when I'm going kind of crazy. And I say, would you please help me? And she's so good. Yes, she is. She's definitely a writer. And so is my grandson, by the way. I've got a 13-year-old grandson who is quite the writer as well. And I have no doubt that he will continue to develop that skill.
Well, I love that. I love that you've created a legacy for that mother-daughter bond. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and she's 50, and at this point she says, Mom, I'm going to retire not too long from now, and you're giving me a model of what I can do and what I can be. And I guess I hadn't really thought of it like that. I mean, that's not why I did it. But it is feeling. She does say that it's inspiring for her, and that's always great.
That's wonderful. And maybe one day I'll interview her on this program.
Well, that would be fun.
Well, once you wrote your book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
Once I got it finished, the first thing I did is once I said, okay, I'm done, I gave it to 5 different readers, people I knew. And I then took what they said and went back to it and then did some revising. Not a lot. I mean, some, but not terribly much. But I took about another month and revised. Then I went full bore looking for an agent. So I started in like the end of July, and I got an agent in December. And it was from a big agency, and she was delightful and loved my book and wanted me to. She said she had a long career in editing, and she said, if you'll work with me, I think I can get this book in better shape. And I said, okay, and sure, I'll do that. And so she wrote me a long editorial letter, and I revised the book. And I revised the book again. I did like 3 rewrites under her. So we finally got it to the point by May of that year. This is all during COVID, by the way. This is when COVID hit, right there, 2020. So by May of that year, she said, okay, we're now ready to go. And then she submitted my book to 30 different editors, and they all turned it down. Everyone, they all turned it down. And it was heartbreaking. It was terrible. So I had sent it to her in May. She said, don't worry, you're not going to hear anything for a while. And the negatives always come in first. And it was excruciating waiting, waiting. And then she kind of disappeared on me. She just, we had a little bit of a conversation about what was going on. She said, Deb, they've all turned it down. and I said, why? Like, what's wrong with this book that they're all turning it down? And she said, well, some didn't think it moved fast enough, and some didn't think that it didn't really like one aspect of the book or another. And so I said, well, I can go at it one more time. Well, I did. I went at it one more time, and then she disappeared. Then she really just disappeared. I couldn't reach her. And it was weird. It was so weird because she'd been very attentive. She'd been lovely. And it was awful. I mean, I thought, well, she's gotten sick, because we were both dealing with, she had little children. She was in London. I mean, I was convinced something terrible had happened to this woman. So after trying repeatedly to get in touch with her, I contacted the boss, and it was all over then, because once I did that, she came back and she said, I don't think, we should work together anymore. And I wasn't, it was awkward. It was weird. Yeah. On the other hand, I think she had spent her capital, and she had a lot of it. She really did her best. I saw the list of people that she went to. We did kind of eventually, have a reasonable closure on all of this. She had worked hard for me, and it just wasn't going to sell. So then I was looking at, all right, now what do I do? I took the book and I put it away. I just put it away. I was through the ringer on it. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I was deeply disappointed. And I was working on a different book. As soon as I finished the one book, I went right on and started writing another one, which was the advice I'd gotten from everybody from Margaret Atwood to Stephen King. I mean, I read a lot of books about writing, and they all said that don't sit around. And I wrote essays on top of that, and I did a bunch of other things. But of course, I really wanted that book out. So I was having lunch with a friend in June of this year, of this past year. So almost a year has gone by, and I was talking with her, and she said, well, whatever happened, to that book? And I told her my tale of woe. And she said, why don't you just go to a small press? Just send your book out. You don't have to have an agent. Just see what happens. Well, I got accepted by everyone that I sent it out to. So I found the one that was the best fit, and we went from there. And it is a small press. And so it's not like you're being taken care of by a big corporation. You're being taken care of by a very small number of people, and they've got limited resources. I mean, they've got only so much time and energy and all of that. But boy, I tell you, I mean, my book is April 4th is when it drops. It's up on Amazon right now for pre-order on Kindle. The paperback will be out shortly. So that's what happened. I mean, I didn't have to pay for publishing, and that was kind of my bottom line. I decided that what I really wanted to do, at least for the first book, was I did not want to publish it myself. I wanted somebody else to pick up that cost. And I mean, I will be paying for marketing. There's no question about that. There will be, outlay on my part, already has been, but at least I'm not paying for the production of the book.
Well, I think this is a great story, your journey to publication, for all of us to hear, because so many of us think that once you get an agent, it's smooth sailing after that. And I think it's so great to hear that just didn't happen. Just because you have a big agent doesn't mean that the book will sell. And then you have to pivot and continue writing and get ready to, launch another book. But I love small presses, and that's what I chose to do as well. So I think at this point in my life, I'm not going to wait 2 or 3 years to try to get an agent and to try to see it, become reality. So I think that's what a lot of our age group has decided to do, is to find those micro or small presses, or to choose a hybrid, or to self-publish. And those are so many options that we now have.
Yeah, it is a different landscape altogether. When I first got involved in writing back when I was in my early 20s, and it was considered shameful to do it was called a vanity press. And it was kind of like, boy, this is, how desperate is this person that they're doing that? And that's over. I mean, right now with the technology that we have, it's relatively simple to get a book published, and not that expensive. It doesn't have to be. So I certainly wouldn't, at this point, I wouldn't take it off the table. even if you get an agent, like I'm a good example of that. It just didn't. And I want to say this was a good agent who worked hard, who was in communication with me, and who did her level best to try to sell my book. And it just wasn't getting picked up.
Well, in talking about the big five and publicity, they're requiring their authors to do most of the legwork as well. They may do for a few months some publicity for them, but most of us are finding that we have to do our own publicity. What have you found that you've been doing pre-publication? And for everyone who's listening later, that's 2023 when her book will be available. What publicity worked or maybe didn't work that you think you've been working on?
Well, until because I went through this whole experience with the agent, I have been really gun shy until it actually happened. I've also read stories about small presses folding left and right. I had all of this anxiety around, do I really say that it's a real book? Okay. Even today, this morning, just before I got on with you, I have the checklist to one more time to go through everything on the book to make sure that it's all been checked over. And we've been going back and forth on back cover copy and all kinds of stuff, but we're really reaching the end now. As far as publicity goes, I've learned a lot about publicity. I have taken part of my journey in writing this book and has been to take a lot of courses through. I've gone to workshops and I've taken workshops through Writer's Digest, and I've done a lot of reading, and I have identified kind of a strategy for myself about what I'm going to do. I don't have a huge presence for social media. I have a website and it's been ramping up lately. I've been putting more things on it. Blogging seems to be kind of the past. More people are just doing a newsletter where if people are interested in reading what they want your stuff, then they want to be notified of it, that sort of thing. So I'm doing more of that. I found out about a press release company called EIN Newswire, and I'm going to use them. I can get my press release, which I've written, and it's good. I like it, and so does the publisher. They like it better than theirs, so they're going to use it. And I'm going to be putting that out as soon as I've got a book that's actually a physical book that somebody can know. So because of the nature of my particular book, it's got a tie-in with what's happening in the country right now, because it's a book about the historical roots of abortion. And so I think that it may get some press because of that.
Well, I think so too. I think anytime any of our fiction books can tie to a topic. My topic in my first book was adoption, which, is kind of the flip side of abortion back in the 50s and 60s. And so I was able to be on a lot of news programs and talk about adoption and how it's changed since the baby scoop era, and women's issues today certainly make those pertinent topics for us to discuss. So you'll be able to speak to a lot of people about that topic as well.
I think so. I really don't know. I'm kind of curious. I think so. I think it's a real relevant topic, but I really don't know what's going to happen. Of course, I know that I will get interviewed and I will be reviewed by my local media, and I've got local bookstores all lined up to do readings and things like that. So there's local stuff that I'm doing, but in terms of picking up a more national presence, I really like the Newswire service. The EIN Newswire will, for a very small amount of money, get my news from my press release out there to hundreds of outlets. And the good news is that you can, for a small amount of money, get your press release in front of hundreds of outlets. The bad news is everybody else knows that too. So you have to have something that's going to draw their attention. And so I've tried to write a whiz bang press release that will capture attention. I had a brief time where I was a journalist, so that's helped me.
I'm sure that that did, and you know what they're looking for. And so many journalists today are so overwhelmed that sometimes they'll take that press release and run it verbatim.
Well, that's what I tried to make it so if somebody just wanted copy, there it is. We'll see what happens.
How did writing your first book change your process of writing? You mentioned that you are writing a second book.
The difference between my first book and my second book, I'm a little lazier on my second book, to be honest with you. I mean, now that I've got one that's kind of in the pipeline, I can breathe a little bit. But I think and my process is pretty much the same. I mean, I get up in the morning and I eventually make it up to my writing place, which is above the house proper. There's another whole apartment above my house, and we think about renting it someday, but probably not. It's just mine. So it's great for when people come to visit. And I go up here and I've been doing a lot of research. This is another historical novel that I'm working on. And so I'm buried in incredible amounts of data and trying to sort it all out and put it into some kind of shape. And I'm just about done. And I'm finding that finishing it is hard for me. Finishing this particular book is hard. And I know it's almost done. I mean, it really is. And I'm just finding it difficult to finish it. I didn't have a hard time with finishing my first book. Once I got there, I was like, okay. And this one, I'm having a hard time letting it go.
Well, I think that's very normal. I think all of us have difficulty ending our novels. I got hooked on editing, and I had about 5 editors. And, they say writing is rewriting. And I certainly rewrote my novel so many times because every editor would ask you to do something different and find different passages that they liked or didn't like. So I really found it difficult to end the process.
What did you do? How did you end it then
when I finally just got sick to death of it? I just said, enough is enough. This story is done. But you could pick up your hard copy book and look through it and say, oh, I wish I had done this or that. So I think especially these people who churn out these books, every year, I think we just have to learn to write more quickly and let it go when it's time to birth that baby.
Yeah, I guess so. I have my neighbor, I have somebody who lives very close to me. That's one of those writers. And it's Jody Picoult. She lives just up the road from me. And she gave me some good advice along the way too. She told me, just keep writing, keep doing it. It's going to happen. You just have to keep on going. She said she got rejected 100 times, 100 different agents wouldn't take her on. So she said, just don't give up. Anyway, I think she pumps out a book a year. There, I see it. She's in the paper all the time. My local bookstores, cartons of her books. I mean, it's something that she just does.
Yes, she's become very successful. So she obviously has perfected the formula.
Yeah. She's added a lot onto her house, though, I can tell you. I mean, she's got pretty much a separate whole house for herself. I mean, I think that probably, I'm sure it's true for men as well, but I think finding the quiet time to write, if one of the reasons why what it took me a long time was being able to carve out that time to just let things settle and where you can think and not be so pressured to get things done.
That's why I love writing retreats. If I can go to a writing retreat and have a class, meet with my fellow authors in the morning and then write all afternoon or into the night or get back together with them for dinner, that's just my favorite thing to do, because then you don't have the responsibilities of taking care of the dogs or walking the dogs or feeding the family. And you just have such a great amount of time at your own disposal. And I love that.
I kind of did that with this book because it was taking place in Canada, in a small community in Canada. I went there and I found this very funky it was kind of a hotel, but it also had studio apartments. And in the middle of winter, nobody was there. I mean, this is a tiny little community of just a few hundred people. In the summer, it gets to be like thousands of people. But so I found this guy, and he rented me this little tiny, studio apartment. I could have my dog, and that's what I did. I just retreated. My husband stayed home, and I just wrote.
That sounds like a great idea.
It worked for me.
Deb, why don't you tell us a little bit about the passages you brought to share with us today, and then read from your book so that we can hear your tone and voice.
The book is about a midwife in the mid-1800s, 1850, and she's come from the woods. She's a trapper's daughter. She and her family kind of stumble into this community to sell their furs, and she very quickly becomes wrapped up in the town. Her family gets sick, and she gets taken in by the other midwife, or another midwife is taught the trade. She gets herself into hot water by offering a very effective, what was called a term regulator, and it was basically an early abortion herbal mixture. And there were a lot of them back in that time. The newspapers were full of them. You could mail order them. They were widely used by many people, many women. So this is a story kind of about that. She develops one of those. It's very effective. It draws the attention of a lot of the business people and more well-to-do men in town. The well-to-do women love her and love this stuff that she's selling, and she peddles it all over, and she gets into trouble. So the book opens with her in jail, and we're learning about what happened and how she got there. And I'll start with the beginning. Jail, a bluebird, February 1850. I hear a bluebird. It's early February, and I know it's too soon for him to be back. When I close my eyes, I see him, a piece of the sky, his breast brushed with the sunset. Did he follow the steamer packet from somewhere south, Boston perhaps, or maybe Maryland? Did he chase a line of slaves escaping to the north? Every day, more of them cross the St. Croix River from Maine to Queens Bay, where they are free and despised. How did my bird find his way to the ash tree outside my window? He flew on a wind blowing north and east, past the Yankees, to this town, in the colony of New Brunswick, its people clinging to the shore, to the past, and to a young queen across the sea. Queens Bay, my home for the past 2 years, shire of the county, graced with a new courthouse and a granite jail, built for the likes of me. The stone blocks glisten with frost, and I think of salt, something I crave. Why am I here? The editor of the Loyalist Gazette is happy to tell me. The letters pour into the paper, mostly doctors from all over New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Upper Canada, and of course from our neighbors in Maine. Because I am a midwife, they write that I am uneducated, a quack, a heathen, a hag, one step from a witch. They write that I kill the ignorant or unwary. They write that I endanger women with my cure, that is Jane's cure, and they call it a quack medicine. They write I do not know what I am doing. They write that hanging is too good for me, that I should be burned at the stake as in the olden days, but that the Queen's law now forbids such punishments, more's the pity. They write I am an unnatural woman who shuns men and children. They write that I kill babies. And they write the one thing that is true. I threaten the sacred duty of women, which is to bring forth children.
Wow, Deb, that's very powerful.
Well,
very, very powerful. What was your inspiration for this book?
Brett Kavanaugh. I had not written, a word of this, what we just heard, until I was watching. I had retired in 2016. We elected a new president that year. And then in the following year, was involved with my dog stuff. I was way up in the woods, and I was listening on the radio to the hearings and listening to this grilling of this poor woman, Christina Blasey Ford. And it was upsetting to me. It was so upsetting. And so I channeled that I was like, why did this happen? I couldn't understand it. I mean, I didn't understand it. And I started asking the question, well, where did these laws come from? When did they start? When did we first starting to pay attention and care what women did with an early pregnancy? And my research took me to New Brunswick, Canada, which is in the northeast corner of Canada in the Maritimes, a place I go all the time because my dog stuff takes me there. I knew New Brunswick. And I found the very first law that prohibited abortion in the United States and Canada started there. And that got me really interested. It's like, oh, okay. So that's kind of how it started. It was born out of my fury and also my curiosity, why did this happen? What was it all about? And I read a lot. I read a lot of scholarship about it. And what I learned was it really wasn't about preventing abortion or trying to save babies. It was when the medical profession was just starting to get itself together. They were just starting to develop what we would now look at as the modern medical profession. And to do that, they needed to squeeze out everybody else who was doing any sort of healthcare. And that biggest group of people were midwives. So by prohibiting midwives from using it, it was very specific. The law was very clear. Anybody who gave anyone what was called a noxious poison with the intent of killing a baby or bringing on a term or preventing pregnancy, so even birth control was included in this first law, could be sentenced to death. I mean, it was very, very, very draconian, really. That law got changed; it got modified because juries weren't really interested in convicting midwives for doing what they'd been doing and what everybody knew they were doing, and what it was pretty common knowledge of how to prevent a pregnancy or interrupt one. So I got so interested in the history. I mean, I could have easily written a nonfiction book. I had enough there, but the fiction was calling me. And this character she called me. She just said, "Okay, you got to write my story." So I did.
Well, our characters really do talk to us, and I'm fascinated by how deeply you delved into the history and that you went there to write. I was going to ask you the question, why Canada? Why did you choose Canada as your setting? And really love your answer.
I didn't expect it. I didn't expect to find myself there. I didn't know that that's where I was going to end up, but that's where I ended up.
Well, Deb, as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Don't give up. I mean, I think that's the biggest piece of advice is that believe in your book, believe in yourself, and don't give up, because and the more you tell people and ask for advice and search for, the place that you need to be in order to make this book come, or your writing come to the fore. Just don't give up. It will happen. I read a wonderful little thing. Stephen King's book about writing is wonderful. And what he said was the same thing. Don't give up. That it's going to take a long time sometimes, but if your work is good, it will find an audience and you will be published. And I held on to that during some tough times. So I guess that would be it more than anything. Don't think about how old you are. Don't look at the calendar. Don't look at anybody else that's really young. Just keep going and it will happen.
Well, that's certainly great advice. And that was your story. And you have seen this book come to fruition even after all the rejections and losing your agent. And I think that's wonderful and inspiring for us today. So we are happy to have you on the program and happy to say that you're now counted among our authors over 50.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.